Welcome back to our 5th lettuce bed episode. As those of you who've been watching know, the last steps here are to replace this electronic valve controller that can only run 3 valves with the new one that we have here. So let's go ahead and zoom right in on the controller, and there's a couple of considerations in installing the new one. First one is, will the new one fit where the old one goes, and how is it actually attached to the wall? It looks like these two are about the same size, so I may get lucky with the same screws. And when you open this up here, and I don't know how well you guys can see, but there is a screw down here, right in there, that can come out. And then at the top, there's a tab that looks very similar to this one, where you can just set that down on top of the screw and it'll set into place. So it looks like we may be set there. We'll have to see as we go along. The other consideration is the wiring. You can see here that there's a white wire as part of this whole harness here, and back there it says COM or common. Each one of these valves has 2 wires coming out of it. One of those wires for each of those goes into the common. So every single one goes into the common and eventually comes here. And then you can see there's 1, 2, 3 wires attached to the 3 valves that this controller can control. And then there's a 4th wire that isn't being used. And in this case, that means I'm going to be able to use this existing wiring harness because it has an extra wire for an extra valve. So I won't have to go buy anything else. So let me go ahead and take this off the wall and see if the new one fits. So my electric drill with the screwdriver bit doesn't fit in there. This thicker one doesn't either. But luckily, I brought a 3rd screwdriver out that's nice and thin. And that's going to do the trick, and it's coming out pretty easily. So that zips right out. Oh, that looks good. And then we'll just lift off the tab, and the old one's out. Simple enough. And there's a little piece of our house's history that I never knew before. There's the old color. Now, we're going to be able to just use the existing screw and slide that right on. And let's see if we can look through the bottom here and see if that other hole lines up. Not quite. So we'll have to make a new hole. We were close, but not quite. As long as I'm at it, might as well do it right. Let's get the level on there and get it nice and level. And then I'll take a drill to pre-drill a little hole in the bottom. And might as well get that lined up just right. Couldn't go in too far because the drill bit wasn't quite long enough. So I'll just finish pre-drilling outside. That should do it. Now that I've got the hole in place, I'm going to take the screw from the previous valve controller and just screw it on in there. And there we have it. Next then is the wiring, and I made an interesting discovery when I took the wires out of the previous controller. There was this assembly where this was outside and this was inside and the wires went in, and it seems like it held everything in place here, as opposed to if you pull the wire from behind, you don't want to pull the connectors. So I was able to just barely fit all these wires through this small connector here, but it looks like there's a punch out here for a bigger hole where this assembly can fit into place. So it seems like that's the way to go. So I'm going to bring this off the wall. Actually got the screw ready for you all. Bring that off the wall. And you can see down below here, it looks like we can just pop that piece out and then use this assembly here. So I'm going to go ahead and figure out how to do that. Now, for some of you who have done this type of thing before, you probably knew that was coming before I did. So you'll learn a lot when you do a new project. So I took the timer off and brought it over to the garage here where I've got my different tools. And I'm actually going to use this cutout because in the final position of this holder on the wall, in a different position where it's going to be now, this is going to work better, and I can run the electric cord and the wire harness that we were just looking at up into this container, into this outlet. So I was thinking I might actually use my hole saw kit, but that one looked a little too big, the next one looked a little too small. But then as I looked at it more closely, they've got it designed so you can just score it with a knife here and pop it on out. So I'll just take my utility knife, and it gets in there pretty easily, and you just sort of score it. There we go, popped right out. So it left a little bit of a jagged edge, so certainly not required, but I'm just going to give that a couple of quick passes with the sandpaper to smooth it off, and then we'll be ready to bring it back out and put the wires through. So back outside, and I have just discovered that this only goes on one way. The rubber bushing fits in there, and then that screws on. And now that I know how it fits, I go in here, and guess what? That doesn't quite make it. So sometimes that happens with a project, and it doesn't mean it's all doomed. It just means I have to go back out and make this opening a little bit bigger, go back to the garage, and I'll bring this piece with me to make sure I have it right before I come back out again. So back to the drawing board. Now, even though this is going in the other way, I can use it to see if it's going to fit in there, and we're pretty darn close. I think seeing it so close, I'm just going to scrape with a knife here a little bit, and then use a little bit of sandpaper and see if that'll get that little bit extra that I need. Yeah, it looks like it's just scraping off a little bit there, so... There we go. That should do it. Make sure it fits in from this way as well, because that's the way that really counts. So now that comes right through. And you know, my next concern is there's not a lot of thread left here. Hopefully I won't have to cut this outer tab off, but guess we'll see when we go back out there. And now for the moment of truth. Go ahead and put this back in like we had it in the garage. Make sure that's set in place. Then we will feed the wire up through there. Get this rubber bushing set right in there. And it looks like there's going to be just enough thread for this to grab securely. And we get about a full turn out of it. And when I tighten it up here, that is nice and secure. So, whew, good. That saves another modification step that we don't have to do. And what I did ahead of time, did a couple things ahead of time. When I undid the wires from the previous valve, I labeled which one was valve 1, 2, and 3. And I'm going to change that a little bit now. Valve 1 is still going to be green, but then we're going to go in a little bit different order for 2, 3, and 4, and I'm going in the order of the valves from right to left. So I've got my little diagram here so I don't mess it up, and then it's just a matter of connecting these wires into the little plugs here according to the way I want it to be. So the way this works is you get the wire in place, you push this little tab down with the screwdriver, and then the wire goes in there, and then you let the tab go, and it's spring-loaded, and it holds the wire into place. So let's see if I can get that in a little more securely. That ought to do it. And then number 1 is the green. That's actually going to water the lawn. So I'll get that in place, right in the zone 1 connector. Push that in. Let it go, Excellent. And let's see, I should probably put that underneath. That wire's a little bit longer. Number 2 is red, our new valve. That one's in. Number 3 is blue, one of the existing valves. That's going to go to our original 24-foot straight bed. Good, so that's securely in place. I'll push those down out of the way. And then finally, we've got yellow for what's now going to be valve number 4, going to our 34-foot L bed, plus the extra stuff that runs off of that irrigation. So I'm going to double check the wires here. That feels good and secure, so we're wired up. And then just down below, to the left of our new valve controller assembly, we have the valves themselves. And that green one on the right is going to be number 1. That's going to operate the lawn. The second one, just to the left of it, is the new valve, and you can see there's not a lot of water mineral crud on there, so that's the new one. That's number 2, and then number 3 and number 4. And down at this end, things look pretty straightforward. You can see here, remember over on the electronic controller side, the white cable was the common. And you can see the 3 other valves all lead into the white cable. And then the red one is blank, so I stripped that back. So I don't know, actually, if this is necessary, but I noticed on these other valves that there's 2 wires coming out, and these have been out in the sun so long and they're all oxidized, I really can't tell if they're marked differently. But I noticed with these other 2 valves that the wire that comes out of the off side goes to the common ground. So I don't know if that's necessary, but I'm going to hook it up this way just in case it is. And if it doesn't matter, well, then that'll be fine too. So this side will go to the common, right like that, and then this side will go in with the red. Oops, I'm going to need a new cap for that, which I've got in the garage, and then we'll test it out. So I got my few different size connectors I've got here, and I'm going to start with the common. So the off, that came pre-stripped from the factory, so that's kind of nice. That's going to head over here. Kind of get that out of the way. Undo the harness here for the common. Oh, I had gotten that nice and tight last time. And you know what? I think what I'm going to do is use this cap for the other side that only 1 wire has to connect to. And because we're getting quite an accumulation now, we're adding another wire in here, and we're now going to have 5 instead of 4. I'm going to wrap this around, and then I'm going to use a larger cap. And I think that will be appropriate for the larger assemblage of wires here. So we'll screw that in. Make sure those are nice and secure. Great, so that's nice and tight, and it'll keep everything together. And then the threaded electrical cap will thread on there and keep those together and help protect it from water and other stuff. So there we go. So I'll kind of have all these facing up. So again, to protect them from the weather, I'm going to tuck them back out of the way over here. And now we're ready to try out the new controller and the new valve. So back at this end, everything's all hooked up now. We set the time and the date. And there's a little thing on here. It says water 1 zone now. And you set the dial to the zone you want to water, and you push that button. Ideally, we would have done a pressure test before we buried everything, but we only glued a few joints together, and so we're going to take a chance here and figure that's going to be okay. So we're going to set this. We'll hear the water go through if everything goes according to plan. We haven't done this in advance. This is you're here with us real time. And what we should hear is we should hear the water go through. We should see some water dripping out of the valve, and then it should stop. In other words, there'll be pressure everywhere, and we shouldn't hear any more noise, and that means everything that we glued is sealed up properly. Then we'll turn the controller on the ball valve, we'll turn that red stem, and we should see everything come out of the drippers. So let's see if we got this figured out. I'm going to put this on zone 2, and then water 1 zone now, select zone on dial first. So zone 2 is selected, Let's push the button. And we don't hear any. Oh, we do. We hear some noise. Hopefully it's this. So I don't actually see any water dripping, but I'm not hearing any water flowing. So hopefully that is a good indicator. So we'll come on over here, and now is the real moment of truth. When we turn this, we should see water come out of the drippers. Don't see anything leaking up here. If there was a leak down there, then the water would be flowing. We'd hear it coming through the valves. So we don't hear anything there. Oh boy, I felt something. Oh yeah. We can hear it now. You can probably hear it. And I see water coming out of all of the drippers. So let's make sure we can get that on the camera here. Let's really crank it up a bit. And of course some air is going to have to come out first. So it looks like we did it right. So now we've got water to our lettuce. So everything's done now as far as the function and the planting of the bed. Now it's just a matter of the decorative finishing touches with our pavers and our chips. Valve installed and timer's going.